It's my great pleasure right now to introduce our wrap-up keynote, which is David Allen. David's bio is in here. It's extensive. He's probably best known as founder of a great Ontario success story in YM Biosciences. He's currently the chairman of the board of Avid Biologics. He's a member of our board of directors, and I've spent the last 3 years at LSO having a great opportunity to work and interact with David. One thing I can say about him, and those of you that know David, I think you would be hard-pressed to find a more passionate advocate for life sciences within Ontario, particularly around the issue of access to capital. He has been a champion and it has just been so engaged in this conversation and has taken it upon himself as a personal mission to rectify what is the biggest challenge in our sector. What some of you may not know about David is he's also incredibly generous with his time. It's not something that he probably gets a lot of recognition for, and I want to take an opportunity to do so because several of our panelists talked about CEO mentorship. David is a serial entrepreneur and he is a mentor to many individuals and CEOs and companies across Ontario. He has participated in our CEO peer-to-peer entrepreneur advisory group. He has also volunteered his time on several of our panels that we hold to talk about issues and challenges facing Ontario life sciences companies. And moreover, when the Ministry of Economic Development asked him to participate with their delegates going down to bio, he did so out of his own time, volunteered his time, sat down with them, and talked about how they can be strategic in getting the most out of this international conference and trade show. So David is a great example of a champion and ambassador for our sector, and so it's my great pleasure to welcome him to the podium.
Jason, you're excessively generous. I didn't know any of those things about myself. May I have the slide, please? And what do I do? Yeah? I need the light. All right. So some of you will know this story, and some of you won't, but when President Kennedy invited Nobel Prize winners to dinner at the White House, he introduced the evening by commenting that this was the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that had ever been gathered at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined there alone. I can think of no closer correlation to this room today than that introduction. Jefferson, Kennedy said, could calculate an eclipse, survey an estate, tie an artery, plan an edifice, try a cause, break a horse, and dance the minuet. Our keynote speaker this morning, Maurice Bertrand, may not quite match all those achievements, but those that he has are mightily impressive. And we're honored to have had him introduce our day. The 6 panels not only fully covered the diversity of our extraordinary sector, but were equally extraordinarily well populated. And I would congratulate LSO under the guidance of our distinguished CEO, Jason Field, our chairman, Paul Lucas, and today's convener, John Kelly, the LSO vice chair, for having so splendidly selected the moderators and members who informed us so exceptionally well. Surely it would be churlish of me to identify any single presenter, but I rather thought that the CEO of Avid Biologics was quite outstanding, didn't you? Whilst this room shines with talent and skill, both scientific and managerial, the purple smog of the inevitable quandary remains in the air. Where is the money? Whoop, I'm sorry, what is that doing? That's not supposed to be there, it's a secret. Where is the money, and why is Canada such a desert in the land of biopharmaceutical finance? While Canada has only one financial intermediary dedicated to the life sciences, our industry is well served both by the domestic effort of some of the other intermediaries and our fortunate access to the only capital market of consequence in the world to finance our endeavors, the United States. That country's investors enjoy no greater appetite for risk than Canada's demonstrably risk-tolerant investors who have plowed tens of billions of dollars into exploration and early development of our natural resources. But beyond our natural resources, we have a national resource that our own government proudly promotes. This is an extraordinary statement. In our sister country to the south, many of the startup biotechs of just 25 to 30 years ago have now established a gray appellation between biotech and pharma. They are nevertheless the youngsters who at just 25 to 30 years old, still in their early years, have grown stupendously on no more profound a scientific foundation than our own government boasts that we have. More peer-reviewed papers than any other medical center in the world. These are our biological resources, just as rocks and trees and biogenic pools are to our natural resource industries. This is what we mine and develop. And what have the successful life sciences miners done in the past 25 years, or even the last 10? And when we answer that, we must ask ourselves, where are the Canadian biotechs who surely have been mining the vast national resource that I've kept up on the screen? So here is the answer. While biotechnology companies are considered an exotic economic appendix in Canada, nice to talk about in caucus, but let's not spend too much time or any money on it, our rivals in the international arena, with arguably less resources than have been given to us to mine, have grown so large that they shame the iconic cornerstones of the Canadian economic establishment. Let us dwell just momentarily on just how much a single handful of US biotechs have been able to translate some of their resources into real medical and economic value. The current market value of these companies represents their market capitalization represents their economic value. Gilead alone, the company that bought YM Biosciences last year, has a greater market cap than the Bank of Montreal, Canadian National Railway, and Imperial Oil combined. One company. But more importantly, if we're talking about national resource and natural resource, only two, Gilead and Amgen, exceed in market capitalization the market capitalization of the natural resource 1,513 mining companies listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And four of them exceed in market capitalization the total market cap of the entire energy business, the entire oil and gas business in Canada, 340 TSX listed companies. Isn't that extraordinary? Forestry doesn't even count. Let me comment that the six have market caps roughly equivalent to the top two multinational pharmaceutical companies, Johnson & Johnson and Roche Genentech. But here's the point. It takes 74 more biotechs, a total of 80, to match the top three if you add Novartis in. My point being that there's a huge economic impact from the development of our national resource that I put up on the board. 74 more companies with an average market capitalization of $1.5 billion to mine the national resource. That would provide us with an economic consequence that dwarfs almost every other growth undertaking that our federal and provincial governments have embraced. In order for us to enjoy the national wealth benefit from this national resource, governments must remember their function. The creation of public policy and the attendant fiscal environment to encourage and promote capital formation in our industry. Putting $10 million here and $15 million there is not going to translate the enormous number of peer-reviewed papers into products useful for human health on which corporations are created for their exploitation. Fortunately, a new stock exchange has been approved and established in Canada. And one of its cornerstones is an enthusiasm for and a concentration on small and medium-sized enterprises with a keen focus on capital formation. That is Equitas Neo Exchange. Capital formation, currently the critical missing element in our industry's challenge to move from small to medium, itself the necessary precursor for moving from medium to large to be one of these companies. The presence of flow-through shares in the natural resource financing, specifically penalizes risk-tolerant investors who are subsidized by federal tax policy for staying away from biotech. But those risk-tolerant investors would enthusiastically provide the capital required by our industry if treated equally. Given the monumental consequence, the evidence-based facts that I described here, precisely what we can expect from the exploitation of our national resource, government should adopt, I submit, the government should adopt a public policy position designed to foster and promote the life sciences as the single priority initiative for Canada at this time because of the magnitude of the successful translation of our science into products that we ignore to our economic peril. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been just one swell day. Thanks to all of you, attendees, panelists, moderators, and Life Sciences Ontario for our particular thanks to Maurice Pitron for his inspiring keynote speech. Good day.
Thank you, David. You certainly did not disappoint. I told you he was passionate. I have a few thank yous to say, and then I promise the bar will be open. So I want to just start by saying again thank you to all of our sponsors, particularly the event sponsors for today, Alcon, Agri-Technology Commercialization Center, City of Toronto, which was the sponsor for that wonderful Next Generation panel. I forgot to mention them specifically, so City of Toronto did sponsor that. Pfizer, Greater Minneapolis, St. Paul region, and Marsh. I'd also like to thank our corporate sponsors, RX&D, again, City of Toronto, KPMG, which assisted us in the development of that report. I want to point out, though, that is not a KPMG report. That is an LSO report. We created that report. We did the methodology. We brought KPMG on board as an in-kind contributor to that report to help bring validation of the data. But LSO, through its own internal resources, got that report completed. And so it's a real tribute to our organization, I think, to develop that report and share it with our community because we thought it was important. Sanofi Pasteur, Ernst & Young, Richmond Hill, Novartis, our silver sponsors. And before I hand you off to access the bar, I just want to finish off by picking up something that was discussed a little bit earlier, and it was the concept around talk versus action. When we first proposed this policy forum, we did not want this to be another opportunity to just sit around and talk about what's wrong with our life sciences industry. We want it to be informative, but we want there to be outcomes. And so going forward, what I can say is we've got about half a dozen or so people taking notes from today in terms of the proceedings. We plan to collect that information, distill it down into some very specific recommendations, which we will then be publishing early next year as an advocacy platform for our industry. So look for that to come out early next year, probably in about the first quarter. In January, we will be releasing that sector study, that sector report, which will provide the evidence and basis for a lot of the recommendations that we will be putting forward. So those will be two key documents for us going forward. As I mentioned, we're not government funded. We're fully member funded, and that's why it was so important for me to reiterate our members' and sponsors' support. If you're interested and see value in both the sector report and the advocacy going forward, if you're not a member of LSO, I would encourage you to join. If you see value in those initiatives and would like to sponsor, we would welcome that support as well. And finally, we talked about getting there through collaboration. LSO has embodied the spirit of collaboration through all of our activities, and we will continue to do so. That said, we cannot wait for everyone to see the light in terms of collaboration as the way forward. We have a solid group of partners, and we're going to move it forward because there's urgency. The time to act is now. But we will always be open whenever any organization in Ontario is ready to join this effort. We will welcome them with open arms. Finally, I just want to say a quick thank you to the organizing committee for this event. John Kelly has been the chair of the organizing committee. John, please stand up. Round of applause for John. Our committee members have included Jason Laughlin, Seth Chidiat, Christine Bayert, Mark Smithies, Colleen Lighton, Benny Ravinsky, as well as myself. And I'd also like to specifically mention a young man who's been running around here frantically. You've met him at the registration desk. You've seen him doing technical duties. His name's Brian Craig from First Stage Enterprise. He has done all the heavy lifting behind the scenes logistics. Please, a round of applause for Brian. Finally, I want to thank you all for hanging in there to the bitter end, and we will reward you with the bar rolling in as I speak. That was great timing. Thank you.